Every morning at 5 a.m., I watched a stranger dive into the freezing Atlantic. I thought he was just brave. I didn't realize he was looking for a ghost until the day he looked back at me. They call it the blue hour, that fleeting moment before the sun breaks the horizon, when the world is draped in shades of indigo and slate. For most people, it's a time for deep sleep. For me, it was the only time my brain stopped litigating every mistake I'd made in the last decade. My name is Oliver. 3 weeks ago, I was a senior partner at a firm in Manhattan, living on espresso and adrenaline. Today, I'm a man sitting on a weathered cedar deck in Maine, wrapped in a wool blanket that smells of salt and old wood, watching the ocean breathe. I thought I was alone out here. The nearest town is 5 miles of winding dirt roads away. But every morning, at exactly 5:15 a.m., he appears. He comes from the tree line, a shadow moving against the gray sand of the private cove below my cabin. He doesn't hesitate. He doesn't test the water with a toe. He strips down to nothing but a pair of dark trunks and dives headfirst into the freezing Atlantic. I watched him through my binoculars the first morning, feeling like a voyeur. But now it's become my ritual. I make my coffee, sit in the dark, and wait for the swimmer. He stays under for a long time, long enough that I find myself holding my breath, my heart hammering against my ribs until his head finally breaks the surface. He doesn't swim laps, he just exists in the water. He floats on his back, staring up at the fading stars, letting the tide pull him toward the rocks before he swims back with a powerful, effortless stroke. On the 4th morning, the fog was so thick I could barely see the railing of my deck. I figured he wouldn't show. But then, through the white haze, I heard it. The rhythmic slap, splash of a steady crawl. I found myself walking down the wooden stairs before I could talk myself out of it. My boots crunched on the wet pebbles, the sound swallowed by the mist. He was standing in the shallows when I reached the shoreline, water cascading off his shoulders. Even in the dim light, he looked like something carved from the coast itself, rugged, scarred, and beautiful in a way that made my chest ache. "It's 42 degrees, I said, my voice sounding thin against the roar of the surf. He didn't startle. He slowly turned his head, his hair plastered to his forehead, his eyes the color of a storm-tossed sea. This was Caspian. 44, he corrected, his voice a low rumble that seemed to vibrate in the damp air. The current shifted last night. He stepped out of the water, his skin flushed red from the cold. He didn't reach for a towel, he just stood there, letting the wind bite at him. "You're the lawyer from the Miller cabin," he said. It wasn't a question. "Oliver," I offered, stepping closer. He looked at me then, really looked at me, and for the first time in years, I felt like someone was seeing past the suit, past the burnout, and into the hollow space I'd been trying to fill with silence. "You watch me," Caspian said. "Not an accusation, just a fact." "I make sure you come back up," I replied. A small ghost of a smile touched his lips. He looked back out at the dark water, his expression turning distant and heavy. "Sometimes," he whispered, "coming back up is the hardest part." The mist didn't lift so much as it dissolved, turning the world into a blurred watercolor of gray and gold. Caspian finally reached for a faded navy towel draped over a piece of driftwood. He moved with a heavy, deliberate grace, as if every limb was weighted down by the water he'd just left. "You should get inside, Oliver," he said, rubbing the towel over his hair. "The wind is turning north. You're shivering." I hadn't realized I was. The cold was a sharp needle against my skin, but I found I didn't want to move. "I'm fine. I've spent 10 years in a climate-controlled office. I think I forgot what the air actually feels like." Caspian paused, his eyes narrowing slightly. He walked toward me, stopping just a few feet away. Up close, he smelled like brine and cedar wood. "New York," he said, the words sounding like a foreign language on his tongue. "I went there once. Too many people trying to be seen and nobody actually looking at anything." "You're not wrong," I admitted. "In Manhattan, the silence is a luxury you have to pay for. Here, it's free. It's also a lot louder than I expected." Caspian gestured toward the path leading up to his small cottage, a squat stone structure tucked behind a stand of wind-bent pines. Coffee's better than silence when you're freezing. Come on. I followed him. His house was a reflection of the man, minimalist, sturdy, and filled with the tools of a trade I didn't understand. Scraps of polished wood lay on a workbench, and the walls were lined with hand-drawn nautical charts. But it was the kitchen that caught my eye. On the small wooden table sat a single framed photograph of a younger Caspian and another man, both laughing on the deck of a fishing boat named the Stella. Caspian noticed me looking. He didn't turn the photo over, and he didn't offer a story. He just poured 2 mugs of coffee that tasted like it could strip paint. It was perfect. "Why you do it?" I asked, wrapping my hands around the warm ceramic. "The swimming, it's not for exercise. You dive like you're looking for something." Caspian sat opposite me, his damp hair curling at his neck. He stared into his mug for a long time. My brother, Elias, he was the captain of the Stella. 2 years ago, a rogue wave hit them 5 miles off the point. They never found the boat. They never found him. The air in the small kitchen suddenly felt as heavy as the ocean floor. I've dealt with loss in my line of work, estates, wills, the clinical side of death. But this was raw. This was a man living in the shadow of a ghost. "I swim because the water is the only place he still exists," Caspian whispered. "When the temperature drops and the pressure hits my chest, I can almost feel him, like we're breathing the same salt. People in town think I'm crazy. They think I'm trying to drown myself by inches." "Are you?" I asked softly. Caspian looked up, and for the first time the storm in his eyes calmed. "I was, until a week ago, until I started noticing a light in the Miller cabin every morning, until I realized someone was sitting on that deck, making sure I came back up." My heart did a strange, fluttering roll in my chest. "I didn't think you saw me." "I see everything on this coast, Oliver," he said, reaching across the table. His hand was warm now, his fingers rough from woodwork. He didn't grab my hand. He just rested his palm near mine, a silent invitation. "You came here to disappear. I came here to stay disappeared. But maybe we've both been underwater long enough." The tension in the room wasn't the sharp, jagged kind I was used to in the city. It was slow. It was the way the tide gradually claims the shore. I looked at his hand, then back at his face. The burnout, the lawsuits, the endless noise of my old life, it all felt like it belonged to a different person. "I don't know how to stay above water anymore, Cass," I confessed, my voice breaking. Caspian stood up, moving around the table until he was standing over me. He placed a hand on my shoulder, the weight of it grounding me. "Then don't," he said. "Just breathe, 1 blue hour at a time." The weeks that followed were measured not in hours, but in tides. I stopped setting my alarm. I didn't need it. My body had synced with the rhythm of the cove and with the man who lived within it. Every morning we met at the shoreline. Some days we spoke. Most days we didn't. We simply existed in the shared space of the blue hour. I started joining him in the water, not for the long, haunting dives Caspian favored, but to feel the shock of the cold, the way it forced my lungs to work, the way it made me feel undeniably, painfully alive. One evening, as a storm began to brew on the horizon, Caspian brought me to the very edge of the cliff. He was holding a small wooden box he'd been working on at his bench. "My brother always said, the ocean doesn't take things," Caspian said, his voice competing with the rising wind. "It just holds on to them for a while. I've spent 2 years trying to reach into the dark to grab him back, but I think it's time I let the water have him." He opened the box. Inside was a handful of dried sea glass and the compass Elias had used on the Stella. Together, we watched as Caspian cast them into the churning surf below. It wasn't a tragedy anymore. It was a release. Caspian turned to me, his face wet with spray. "You saved me, Oliver. You were the light on the shore when I was looking for a reason to stay under." I reached out, my fingers tangling in the damp wool of his sweater. "I didn't save you, Cass. I just waited for you. I think I've been waiting for you my whole life." He leaned in, and the kiss was like the ocean itself, vast, deep, and inevitable. It tasted of salt and the promise that neither of us had to be alone in the dark anymore. I wasn't an architect of lawsuits anymore, and he wasn't a ghost hunter. We were just two men, standing on the edge of the world, finally breathing the air.
The ocean is vast, but it's the small lights on the shore that guide us home. Oliver and Caspian found their light in the blue hour, and sometimes that's all we need. Just one person to watch the horizon with us until the sun comes up. If this story felt like a breath of fresh air, please like this video and join our family by hitting subscribe. We are on a mission to hit our next big milestone, and we are currently just 300 subscribers short. Will you be one of the 300 to help us finish this house? Subscribe. Before you go, I want to know, have you ever had a place or a person that felt like your own secret shore? Tell me your story in the comments below. I read every single one.